Okay, I now welcome our second speaker for the afternoon symposium, Josie Barnes-Parker. She grew up in Mississippi and received her bachelor's in English from Arbor University. She earned her MLS from the School of Information here in Michigan in 1996. She's worked in 3 public libraries in Washtenaw County and has been director of the Arbor District Library for almost 17 years. She served as a column editor for In the Public Interest in the Journal of Library Administration from 2013 to 2018. The column focused specifically on the governance and operations of public libraries around the world. She says she's pleased to direct an institution that is one of the 10 public libraries in America that has earned a 5-star rating from Library Journal for 11 consecutive years. She considers it a great honor to lead and direct Ann Arbor's public library. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for inviting me to your event. It's a privilege, a special honor to be able to be here to talk to you about how everyone learns at the public library. And listening to you talk about learning and children, it's humbling for me to follow that. So I'm going to do the best I can. I started my career as a children's librarian. So children and how children learn and what they learn has always mattered to me greatly, enough to pursue a career working with children. And my career has led me in a different path. But at the public library, as you will see from the slides that I'll be showing you, children are the foundation of public library service. I think if we think of what we do is building for that next generation, if we think of how we do what we do is for that 3-year-old and how that 3-year-old will grow through in life, I think it helps understand why we do what we do and how we do it at the public library in Ann Arbor. So what I'm going to do is have a series of slides that are going to click through about a minute each, and you'll see them, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how everyone learns today in 2018 at the public library, and how that really hasn't changed very much from when Andrew Carnegie first developed public libraries at the turn of the 1900s. It's what we use to learn with that has changed, but that we're learning hasn't changed. So I'll get started. We learn in public buildings, which were very important to Carnegie in understanding how we use space to learn. We're learning more all the time about that and how that's done and how that's changing and what we need to understand in terms of providing space for people and who's in that space in the community in Ann Arbor. The system itself has grown tremendously, and we see it every day. I just left the downtown library to walk over here, and today is an event called Tiny Expo, which is an independent craft market in the lobby, and there are about 2,000 people through there this afternoon for that event, and that's in a public library. It's not every public library that would have such an event, but it is this one. So I don't think it's advancing, so I'm going to do it. Quiet spaces as well as busy spaces. And if you look very closely in the background of this garden area outside the Mallett's Creek branch, you'll see someone, not a person. You'll see a small deer who's there, and because it's, and so if we're sitting in the public library looking out, contemplating and thinking, we are not alone. This space shows people working quietly in the library. This is at Westgate. We are able to have everyone in a space where noise can be part of that space, but also there's quiet. And the public library is trying to design spaces so that we can work, we can play, we can learn, no matter how old we are. And this is at Trevorwood, and this is a slide, a perfect example of a person. We just saw a photograph, the previous photograph, of a number of people using technology to study and learn. This was a workspace of an individual who was writing everything down. And these photographs were all made within the last year, and I would tell you that most of them were sent to us by our patrons who wanted to tell us how much they enjoyed the space. And so they sent us photographs of what mattered the most to them. So I'm sharing it with you. And it's still about reading. It's been about reading from the very beginning. It was about books at one time and only about books. For this little girl at the end of summer reading, where she finished her summer game, she chose Charlotte's Web. And I know there are people in this room who've all read Charlotte's Web, and we're still reading Charlotte's Web. This one is fun. This is Blind Date with a Book. This is an event we have around Valentine's Day, where the books are wrapped up. You can't tell anything about them other than what size they are, and you check it out on faith. And most of the people who check out a book without knowing what it is talk about how much they enjoyed reading something that they likely would not have chosen themselves. So it's the serendipity and the discovery. It's opening your mind to other ideas and other possibilities, and also giving yourself the freedom to not like it and to be able to say so, that it's okay. Did you know that you can check out a human skeleton model at the public library? And in Arbor, you can. This is a direction the library has taken. We call it Tools Collection. It began over 40 years ago with the Ladies Library Association, and they purchased art prints and framed them and offered them to the public to take home and to hang on their walls or in their offices, in their homes, in their dorm rooms. We still circulate art prints, and they're one of the highest circulating formats we have. And we buy them new all of the time. That tool, that art tool, led to telescopes. A club, astronomy club in town, asked us, if we buy them, will you loan them? And we said, we'll try it. And we did. And it's led to guitars, as well as the skeletons. It's led to microscopes, telescopes, the Tyrannosaurus Rex teeth models, to sewing machines, to spinning wheels, are all items that we can check out, you and I can check out at the library. And if you don't know how to use something, an electronic music console, you may come to the library on certain nights where these are all set up and you can try them out. And this little boy is clearly enjoying himself. And here is an example of a group of people performing, some of them using some of the instruments they check out from the public library. But this is in the downtown library multi-purpose room. This is obviously a jazz band. The next photograph is also in the downtown library multi-purpose room. And this is a Martin Luther King Day event. And this is a group of people using instruments from Africa. And it's a day when kids are out of school. So we have hundreds of people come through for a different kind of event. And if you notice, there are women dancing, and everyone could join in. This is a photograph that I thought about when our previous speaker was talking. We were talking about learning and how we use our hands and we use our mind and we enjoy what we're doing. We're learning something to do because we want to do it for fun. We're not necessarily learning to do it because it's how we're going to make a living, but it gives us pleasure, helps us develop our mind, our whole self. And these are children taking an art class downstairs in the secret lab at the downtown library. And this is obviously younger children. And then, if you're grown up and you want to learn how to draw, you can take art with Bob Ross. How many people remember drawing with Bob Ross on PBS in the 90s? Yes, well, today you can come to the public library in Ann Arbor on January 6th and you can draw along with Bob Ross, and you'll be one of probably about 300 people who show up to do it. It's amazing. It's a phenomena, and it's sort of picked up and it's happening all over the country, and public libraries are hosting the draw along with Bob Ross, Paint Along with Bob Ross. And for some reason, Mr. Ross's quiet, patient, sweet tone, non-judgmental, everyone can learn, everyone can draw along, is reaching out to people, and it's through the public library. It's amazing. And then we also use our spaces to remind ourselves and others of who has given so that we can be free. This is an exhibit, the tour, Always Lost, a meditation on war. It's the U.S. military war dead since September 11th, 2001, and it was simply photographs, portraits of all the people who had died in the Middle East primarily since 2001. We were the only location in Michigan that held this exhibition, so people came from several states to be there. Veterans from World War II, Vietnam, as well as the Afghanistan and Iraq wars met together in the library space to remember and to discuss how these wars happened and who we've lost. At the same time, that exhibit space in the downtown library is used locally by many artist groups who ask for the space at no charge. They're able to put their artwork on the walls for 6 weeks at a time. And we book this exhibit space out now about 2 years in advance. There's such a demand to have local art hanging on the walls in the public library so that all of us can see it. And this is an example of what's going on today down at the library. This is an artist, local artist with work. And today, if you leave here and you get to the downtown library before 5:30, you will see a lobby full of art. The letterpress, interestingly enough, for an industry, a public library industry like mine, that has taken technology as a tool and taken it seriously and embedded it in all that we do, we have found that there is an intense interest in the printed word and how printing happens. Not only the book that we hold and read, but how did that book happen? Who put that book together? How did this happen? So we have a letterpress lab in this downstairs that meets every week, and people learn how to do it, and people are printing their own small books in this letterpress lab at the library. And I want to say too, there's no charge for any of these things. This is already paid for through your tax dollars. Here is another example of how people come together at the public library to learn. This is Keegan Rogers, a beloved, well-known local chef who packs a room with 300 people to talk about how to make cookies because his cookies are so good. He's doing it up there. Everyone else is listening and watching and taking notes. But Keegan comes and talks about cooking, and people come and listen, and then most people will stay long enough to have a cookie. The other part of the prior talk that made me think about how we are learning at the library is with our hands. This is a knitting class, and what you see is the yarn ball there. This woman also spun that before she used it to knit. And she learned how to do the spinning at a class at the public library, and she can check out a small spinning wheel at the public library. So it's how we learn, what tools do we need to learn, and where can we find them. And the other thing about knitting at the public library, she's in a room with about 30 other people who are learning how to do that, all ages. So we're not segregated into our ages. We're all learning as a community, and we're all aware of each other that way. Oops, I skipped one, sorry. Here's an example of screen press. People are learning how to use it, and they make a bag that they can take away. That's in the lower level at the library. Story time. Something that's a favorite for me because I started out doing story time. We used to, in public libraries, think that we had to limit story times to 15 or 20 children, or we could not effectively deliver the story in a way that they could receive. We were imposing a limit on the imaginations and the abilities of toddlers. Shame on us. Shame on us. We don't do that anymore. Now our story times can have upwards of 80 children in the room. They're all fixed on the faces of the people telling the story. They know what to expect. They know when they're going to sit down. They know when they're going to stand up. They know when they're going to get to be a part of it, and they know when they're going to be able to start and end. It's amazing. So amazing that when we have a Halloween event at the library, we have to divide and do it twice, because 10 years ago we were getting 100, 150 or so small children on a weekday, so it's small children only. Now it's 2,000 people on the morning of Halloween, so we have to divide. And these are the same people you saw telling the story to 80 children weekly at the library. They're standing up there doing the presentation of Halloween out to hundreds. In the lobby of the library. We have to clear it all out. This is the penultimate. This was the solar eclipse. I don't know if you were downtown on the day of the solar eclipse. I was, along with thousands of other people, and the library wanted to be a part of it. I mean, it's not a program you get to have on your own, right? The sun eclipses, it doesn't ask us if it's going to happen or not. And so then you work yourself around it. And we had NASA astronauts there. We had people talking about what was happening. And all outside, this is outside the downtown library. People are getting ready to watch the solar eclipse. One of my favorite memories that day is not people getting the glasses to look up, because there weren't enough glasses to look up. It was the teacher who came downtown with a class, showing them how to look at it on the ground, watching it through a shadow on the ground, making them look down, not up. This is the library being involved in cultural events and community events in the downtown. This is another thing we've done. We've taken the library out to Veterans Park and played games. We check out giant chess sets. We check out giant Connect Fours. We check out Frisbee golf cages. We check out, metal detectors. We check out small ping pong tables. And people who are having family reunions, weddings, company parties will come and check these things out of the library. Well, we took all that out to Vets Park, and we have a group who have a trapeze school down in Pittsfield Township came, and they had bubbles, and we found that, here's the trapeze artist, when you bring the library to Vets Park, a couple of thousand people will show up that day, especially if you bring food trucks with it, all sorts of food trucks and ice cream. But what we learned that day is we didn't know those people. All of us who work in the library and have worked in the library for years and seen people coming in, realized we didn't know those people. We took the library someplace else, and someone else showed us up to learn at the library. That little boy is the little boy you saw earlier having a great time learning how to use the electronic instrument. He was dressed up on Halloween as obviously a scientist. And he was standing on the stage for the costume contest. And he was loving every second of it. He didn't have any problem at all being on that stage in front of all those people. This is our latest addition to Westgate Branch. If you're a Westgate Branch user and you haven't been out there in a while, we put an Everbright up on the wall. For those of you in the room who remember a Light Bright, It's the same thing, except it's electronic, so when you run your hand across it, changes all the colors, changes all the shapes. And last week, a school group from Scarlett went through there on a library trip, and they turned it black and red because that's the color of their school colors. They made it theirs. And this is also learning at the public library. We started out with the photograph of the little girl with her books. These are young children playing on the iPads at Westgate and the educational software that we have there, and they're together. And I want to thank you. What I wanted to convey through slides was that learning happens at the public library, because what you're talking about is learning, and that it is pretty much what we heard earlier. Give people the opportunity to learn, let their curiosity take them in whatever direction they're interested in going, and then hands off. Let them be. Let them explore it. Let them find it out for themselves. And don't put any boundaries around them about what is better, what is good, what is best. Let them be. And the public library as an institution has done that in Ann Arbor since 1866. And if I'm guessing, and I think I'm guessing right, it'll be doing it in 2066. So thank you very much for your time. I'll take questions if we have time. I'm not sure how far behind you want to get.
We do have a few minutes.
Anyone? Someone. And I know you're taping, so that's why I want you to wait for the microphone.
I just wanted to make a comment. And first of all, thank you so much, and congratulations on what you're doing, because you certainly emphasized the idea of learning, but I actually think you're doing something far greater, and that is something, and I'm looking forward to the next talk on technology, because you're creating a sense of community where I think the world is starting to get more lonely because of the notion of technology. And I think that what you are exhibiting and what you're doing is much more important, and certainly learning has sort of been your foundation, but I think what you're really going to find is that that community spirit is really going to be what continues to grow what you do.
Thank you. My hope. That's my hope. All the way. This is going to be a hard question.
No, it's going to be an easy one. You have seen the arrival of the internet in a big way over the years. How has it impacted libraries? What have you seen?
The internet has transformed libraries. I was saying earlier, when I was in grad school at Michigan, I was older when I went to grad school, and so it was in 1996, 1994, 1996, the internet, I watched it. I watched the graphical web come up. We all stood in a room. It was like happening. So I saw that. And I was involved in a project while I was in grad school called the Internet Public Library, which existed until about a couple years ago. Trying to build a public library in that space. What would that look like? Trying to see how to bridge that. The internet's changed the public library forever. The internet changed how information is collected, how it's aggregated, how it's consumed. It's changed the public's perception of what a human should be able to do if they're asking that human to do it for them. So once, when you could call the library and ask the person a question, they would look up they would have to look in multiple places, print, and it would take time. Now, this expectation is, if we call, right like that, right? Sometimes that's so, sometimes that's not. I think what the internet's done has, in so many amazing things that it's accomplished. It's an amazing tool, and we would have been foolish not to use it. But also, what the internet has allowed us to do is become impatient. It also has allowed us to settle for not the best information. And so I would say that to be aware that with every great tool, there are downfalls, and that we should be prepared to know what they are and to compensate for those. That's what I'd say.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was not an easy question. It's a good question. That's a very good question. Here's one. And I'm going to stay and listen to Kentaro because I want to know what I've heard him talk before, and I want to do that. So I'll be here afterward as well. Yes.
Thanks again for that presentation. It looked very, very cool, the library. I'll be sure to check it out very shortly. I wanted to ask why, so we have thousands of libraries across the country, public libraries. What are some of the challenges that all these libraries are facing in turning into something like that? And I'm sure there are issues like funding, but what issues are you seeing from the community itself? And what sort of initiatives are we seeing across the country to transform libraries to something just like that?
The major challenge to the existence and the strength and the growth of a public library, no matter its size, no matter its location, is the community's will to pay for it. They're free to you to walk in today and to take something out, but they're not free. They're not free to operate. They're not free. They're actually quite expensive. The same way a public school system that's a good one is quite expensive. So if a community that wants a public library the way Ann Arbor delivers a public library has to be willing to pay for that library. And I don't mean extravagantly, but they have to be willing to pay. What we're seeing right now across America are public libraries are being closed because communities are no longer willing to pay for them. And I read about them every day. It's a quiet story, but it's happening. And it's happening a lot out in the Pacific Northwest because of changes in the economy around lumber and timber, and those communities are closing down the public libraries. First, is they're the first thing to go. In a public good situation, they're the first thing to go. The other side of this, when I said a while ago it was shameful of us to limit the learning of children by our own thinking about what pedagogy we use to tell a story, the industry itself, the library industry itself, is in some ways its own worst enemy, because technology came in so fast and so hard that for many it was a wave that just sort of just knocked them over. And coming back from that in a creative, innovative way has been a real struggle. So there are two things going on. It's money and it's philosophy. So, yeah. Thank you all very, very much.